Annabelle thought the worst part of her life was already over. She had watched her mother cry at the kitchen table more times than she could count. She had learned, at an age far too young, that grief was just something you carried quietly, like a backpack you couldn't put down. But nothing, not one single thing she had ever been through, could have prepared her for what came through that front door on a rainy Thursday afternoon in October. Because the man her family had spent 30 years waiting for, the man they called Grandpa, was not the man they thought he was. And by the time they understood that, it was already too late for Annabelle.
Before we begin, let me know in the comment where you're watching from. Would love to hear from you, and your support helps this story reach more people who need to hear it. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos.
The Pruitt household sat on a quiet street in a small Tennessee town where everybody knew your name and nobody locked their doors before midnight. It was the kind of neighborhood where the sound of lawnmowers on a Saturday morning felt like a promise that life was steady, that things were fine, that danger lived somewhere far away on a television screen. Annabelle Pruitt had grown up in that house believing exactly that. She was 17 years old, sharp-minded, and the kind of girl who made everyone around her feel a little more at ease. She had a laugh that filled a room. She kept a journal she never let anyone read. She had plans, real plans, for college, for nursing school, for the kind of life she had designed in her head since she was 12 years old. She was, by every measure, a girl standing right on the edge of everything good. Her mother, Loretta Pruitt, worked double shifts at a distribution warehouse 40 minutes outside of town. Her uncle, Damon Pruitt, came around most Sundays for dinner and fixed whatever was broken around the house. They were a family held together not by wealth or ease, but by the specific kind of love that only comes from surviving hard things together. And they had survived plenty. But through all of it, one absence had defined their story more than anything else. For 30 years, a man named Gerald Pruitt, husband, father, grandfather, had been locked behind the walls of a state correctional facility in central Tennessee. The family rarely spoke about why. The few times it came up, the answer was always the same. He made a mistake. He's been paying for it. People change. And when the call finally came in October, that Gerald was being released, that he had served his time, that he was coming home, Loretta cried. Not from fear, from relief. She had waited her whole adult life to have her father back. She believed, the way only a daughter can believe, that the man walking out of those gates was the same one who used to call her his little star. She was wrong, and the cost of that belief would not be hers alone to pay. To everyone else in that town, Gerald Pruitt was a man who had paid his debt. He showed up with a quiet voice and a gray beard and a paper bag of belongings that didn't take up much space. He said please and thank you. He went to church the first Sunday he was free. And when Loretta introduced him to Annabelle for the first time in the living room, he pulled the girl into a hug and said, "Lord, you look just like your grandmother." Annabelle smiled because her mother was smiling. She smiled because the moment felt like it was supposed to be happy. But later that night, alone in her room, she sat on the edge of her bed and stared at the wall. And she couldn't tell you why, couldn't explain it even to herself, but something in the back of her chest felt tight, like a door that wouldn't quite close all the way. She shook it off. She told herself she was being ridiculous. She told herself this was her grandfather, but no one really knew who he had become, not even the people who loved him most. The first 2 weeks were unremarkable. Gerald kept to himself mostly. He slept in the spare room at the end of the hallway. He drank his coffee black every morning and sat by the window like a man still getting used to the size of the sky. Loretta was happy in a way her daughter had never quite seen before. Lighter somehow, like something she had carried for decades had finally been set down. Annabelle wanted to be happy for her. She tried. But something kept interrupting that effort. something she couldn't name yet. It started small, the way Gerald would look at her sometimes, just a half-second longer than felt right, before turning back to whatever he was doing. The way he would ask her questions that felt normal on the surface, but landed strangely when she replayed them later. What time do you usually get home from school? Do your friends ever come inside, or do they just drop you off? Does your uncle come around much during the week? She answered all of it because he was her grandfather, and the questions seemed like the kind an old man would ask, but each one stuck to her like a burr, small, irritating, hard to shake. He began to show what her mother called special interest in Annabelle, always making sure she had eaten, saving her a plate even when she hadn't asked, leaving small things on her desk, a pack of her favorite gum, a bookmark with a Bible verse, a $20 bill folded into a small square with a note that said, "Just because." When Annabelle mentioned the money to her mother, Loretta laughed warmly and said, "He's just trying to make up for lost time, baby. Let him." Damon said nearly the same thing the following Sunday. "Give the old man a chance, Belle. He's not going to be here forever." And so Annabelle did what the people around her were telling her to do. She dismissed the discomfort. She rearranged it into something softer, something she could live with. She convinced herself it was her own problem, her own awkwardness, that she simply wasn't used to having a grandfather around. And that might have been the end of it, except that things did not stay small. By the third week, the pattern had shifted. Gerald began to linger. If Annabelle was in the kitchen doing homework, he would find a reason to be there too, leaning against the counter, talking about nothing in particular, standing just a few inches closer than felt comfortable. She started adjusting. She moved her study sessions to her bedroom. She started putting her earbuds in earlier than she needed to, not because she was listening to anything, just to signal that she wasn't available. She started timing her mornings so she would leave the house before he came downstairs. She was 17 years old, and she was building a map of her own home around one person's presence. There was an afternoon in early November, a Tuesday, when Loretta was called in for an extra shift and Damon had a work thing 2 counties over. Annabelle came home from school to find herself alone in the house with Gerald. She remembers standing in the entryway with her backpack still on her shoulders, looking at him sitting in the armchair in the front room, and feeling something in her body react before her mind had even caught up. A coldness, a stillness, like every cell in her body had agreed on something that her brain was still trying to argue with. She said she had homework. She went straight to her room and locked the door. She sat on her floor with her back against the bed and didn't move for almost an hour. She didn't know why. She couldn't have told you. She just knew she needed to stay exactly where she was. That evening, Gerald knocked on her bedroom door and asked if she wanted to watch a movie with him since her mom would be home late. His voice was calm, gentle even. There was nothing on the surface that should have frightened her. But Annabelle pressed her palm flat against the door and said very quietly, "No thanks, Grandpa, I'm tired." And then she sat in the dark and waited for her mother's car to pull into the driveway. There was one moment Annabelle would later replay in her mind, again and again, long after everything had changed. One specific moment where she sat in that dark room and thought, really clearly thought, that something was not right. That the feeling in her chest was not anxiety or shyness or teenage paranoia, that it was something older than all of that, something honest. But by the time she found the words to say it out loud, it was already too late. What happened next changed everything, not just for Annabelle, but for every person in that family who had chosen again and again to look the other way. It was a Saturday morning in mid-November. Loretta had gone to the grocery store. Gerald and Annabelle were alone in the house for the second time. Only this time, Annabelle had not yet had the chance to get out.
She was in the hallway, hair still wet from the shower, wrapped in a towel, reaching for her bedroom door, when Gerald appeared at the end of the hall. He said her name, not loudly, softly, the way you say a name when you want to make sure someone is paying attention. And then he walked toward her. She will never fully describe what happened in the minutes that followed.
What she has said, what she told a counselor months later in a voice barely above a whisper, is that she said no. That the word came out of her before she even thought it, that she pushed him away, that she got into her room and locked the door and pressed herself into the far corner and held her phone in both hands like it was the only real thing left in the world. She did not call her mother. She could not find the words yet. She sat on that floor for 2 hours, shaking, until she heard the sound of the front door opening and her mother's voice calling out, "I'm back! Who wants to help with groceries?" And Annabelle looked down at her phone, and she did not move. She did not say anything that day, or the next, or the one after that, because something happens to a person in those first hours after a trauma, something quiet and devastating that the people around them rarely see. The mind starts running calculations. Who will believe me? What will this do to my mother? What happens to this family if I say it out loud? Will they think I misunderstood? Will they say I provoked it? For Annabelle, those questions had answers that all pointed in the same direction: silence. And so she went silent. She went to school. She came home. She ate dinner with her family. She watched her mother laugh with her grandfather at the kitchen table. And she held what she knew inside her chest like a stone she couldn't put down. But before we go any further, if stories like this matter to you, if you believe awareness can change lives, type the word awareness in the comments right now. Because this story is not just Annabelle's, it belongs to every person who has ever been told that their discomfort was not real, that their instincts were wrong, that the people they were supposed to trust deserved their silence. Type awareness if you are still with us. The weeks that followed were the quietest and the heaviest of Annabelle's life. She stopped eating regular meals. She started wearing the same oversized sweatshirt every day like it was armor. She stopped talking about nursing school. She stopped writing in her journal. When her best friend, Kezia Folt, texted her asking why she had been so distant, Annabelle stared at the message for a long time and then typed back, "Just tired. Talk soon." She never explained further. Because how do you explain something that you yourself are still trying to make real? How do you find words for an experience that your own mind keeps trying to reject? Not because it didn't happen, but because accepting that it happened means accepting everything that comes next. The hardest part, and this is something that survivors of in-family abuse have described over and over in documented cases, is not the event itself. It is the aftermath of living inside the same walls as the person who hurt you. Annabelle still had to pass Gerald in the hallway every morning. She still had to sit 3 feet away from him at the dinner table. She still had to listen to her mother say his name with love. Every single day, she performed a version of normalcy that cost her something she couldn't get back. She smiled when she needed to. She answered questions in monosyllables. She counted the hours. The psychological toll of that kind of sustained pretending is something that researchers who study childhood and adolescent trauma have described as a secondary wound. Not the original harm, but the silent, grinding work of surviving inside it. And Annabelle was bleeding from both. There were moments where she almost said something. A Sunday evening when Loretta sat beside her on the couch and put a hand on her knee and said, "You've been so quiet lately. Is everything okay?" Annabelle opened her mouth. The words were right there, right at the edge of her teeth. But then Gerald walked through the room behind them, and the words went back down. She said, "I'm fine, Mama, just school stuff." And Loretta believed her, because she wanted to believe her, because the alternative was something she was not yet ready to hold. Think about that for a moment. Have you ever been in a situation where the truth felt too big to say out loud? Where you held something painful inside because you were more afraid of what the truth would break than of what the silence was costing you? That is where Annabelle lived for nearly 6 weeks. 6 weeks, alone inside a truth that nobody around her was ready to hear. It was Kezia who noticed first. Not the full truth. She didn't have the full truth yet. But she noticed the pieces. The way Annabelle flinched at sudden movements now. The way she always positioned herself near the door in any room she walked into, like she was calculating her exit before she'd even fully arrived. The way she had stopped mentioning home at all, not in complaints, not in passing, not in the casual way that people mention home when it is safe. It had simply disappeared from her conversation, the way a person stops mentioning something that hurts too much to name.
One afternoon in late December, they were sitting together in Kezia's car in the parking lot of a dollar store, neither of them in any particular hurry to go anywhere. The radio was on low, the heat was running, and Kezia turned to her best friend and said, not accusingly, not dramatically, just quietly and directly, "Belle, what is going on with you? And I need you to actually tell me because I am scared." Annabelle looked out the passenger side window. The silence stretched, and then, in a voice that barely made it past her own lips, she said, "Something happened." Those 2 words, that was all. But Kezia heard them the way you hear something when you have been waiting and dreading it for weeks. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel. She said very gently, "Okay, tell me." And Annabelle told her. Not everything, not all at once, but enough to change the course of everything.
It wasn't what she said, it was what she couldn't say. The long pauses, the places where the words stopped and her hands started shaking, the way she kept looking at the door of the car like she needed to confirm it was closed, that made Kezia understand the full weight of what her best friend had been carrying alone. That night, Kezia told her own mother. Her mother called a school counselor she trusted, and by the following morning, the machinery of protection, slow, imperfect, and long overdue, had finally begun to turn. When Loretta Pruitt found out, she did not cry right away. That surprised everyone who was in the room with her, including herself. She went very still. She sat down on the couch where she and Annabelle had shared so many evenings, where she had held her daughter's hand through homework and heartbreaks and hard days, and she went completely, terrifyingly still. Then she stood up, and she asked to be driven to her own home so she could speak to her father herself. The counselor and the social worker who had come with the school's report strongly advised against that. Loretta did not argue, but something shifted in her face in that moment, a closing, a tightening that was not about anger at her daughter. It was the look of a woman reckoning with the specific horror of having been the door through which danger had walked. Gerald was confronted by law enforcement that same evening. He did not deny it entirely. He used language that abusers across documented cases have used with devastating consistency. Vague language, minimizing language, the language of a man trying to locate the smallest possible version of what he had done. "I didn't mean for it to go that far. She misunderstood. I was confused." None of it held. The physical and testimonial evidence was clear. He was taken into custody before midnight. Damon, who had spent weeks telling his niece to give the old man a chance, sat in his truck in the driveway for 40 minutes before he could make himself go inside. He said afterward that the worst part was not the shock. The worst part was the memory of his own voice saying, "He's not going to be here forever, Belle. Let him." He said he would hear that sentence in his head for a very long time. The family fracture that followed was not loud or dramatic. It was quiet. It was the kind of breaking that happens when a truth rearranges everything you thought you knew about yourself and the people you loved.
Loretta did not sleep for 3 days. She went through every memory she had of the past 2 months and examined each one for what she had missed, what she had dismissed, what she had rearranged into something safer because she needed it to be safe. Every small moment she had chosen to call just adjusting. Every time her daughter had gone quiet. Every time she had asked if everything was okay and accepted fine as an answer. She did not forgive herself easily, and perhaps she wasn't supposed to. Gerald Pruitt was charged with criminal sexual conduct and remanded into custody pending trial. He did not make bail. Several months later, he pled guilty to a reduced charge, a deal that spared Annabelle from having to testify in open court. He was sentenced to 14 years. The judge, in her remarks, noted the profound breach of trust involved, that a grandfather, given a second chance by a family that had done nothing but believe the best of him, had chosen to weaponize that belief. She called it a violation that would carry consequences far beyond the sentence handed down in that courtroom. Annabelle began therapy 3 weeks after the confrontation. She did not want to go at first. She sat in the waiting room of the counseling center with her arms crossed and her jaw set, certain she did not need anyone to help her process what had happened. But she went. Week after week, she went. She talked. She cried in ways she had not let herself cry when she was still holding the secret. She put words around things that had only existed as weight, and slowly, not quickly, not cleanly, but slowly, the weight became something she was learning to carry differently. She is still in therapy. She will likely continue for years. Healing, as those who research trauma consistently find, is not a line you cross. It is a direction you keep choosing, even on the days it feels impossible. Loretta and Damon enrolled in a family support program designed specifically for relatives of abuse survivors. Keziah Holt, who had been the one to open the door, received recognition from her school's counseling staff for the role she had played. She hugged Annabelle in the hallway after the ceremony and said, "You would have done the same for me." Annabelle said, "I hope I would have done it sooner." And that sentence, that small, honest sentence, said everything about the weight she had carried and the kind of person she was still choosing to be. Before we continue, if you are new here, please click the subscribe button right now so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. And we would love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your location and say hello in the comments. Annabelle's story is not rare. That is the devastating thing about it. Across documented cases, from courtrooms in Ireland to arrest records in Utah to family services reports across every state in this country, the pattern repeats with heartbreaking consistency. A child feels something is wrong. Adults dismiss it. The child adjusts. The child shrinks. The child survives in silence because the people around them are not ready to hear what the silence is covering. And by the time anyone looks closely enough to see the truth, weeks have passed, months, sometimes years, sometimes a lifetime. And so here is the question that matters tonight, the one that lingers long after the screen goes dark and you carry this story with you into whatever comes next. Do you think the adults in Annabelle's life missed the signs, or did they ignore them? Because there is a difference. Missing a sign means it wasn't visible. Ignoring a sign means some part of you saw it, and you chose the version of events that cost you less. Think about the number of times Loretta could have asked again, the number of times Damon could have noticed, the number of moments that were available and passed because everyone needed the story to be a happy one. Because Gerald's return felt like a gift and no one wanted to unwrap it too carefully.
Now think about the children in your own life. Think about the teenagers you know, the ones who have gone quiet recently, who seem different, who flinch at things they didn't used to flinch at, who have stopped mentioning certain people or places. Think about what it would mean to ask twice, to sit with the silence a little longer, to say, You don't have to be okay. I am not going anywhere until you tell me the truth. Because sometimes the most powerful thing an adult can do for a child is refuse to accept fine as an answer. Sometimes the people we are told to trust the most are the ones we are never taught to question. And sometimes the only thing standing between a child and what is happening to them in silence is one person who was paying close enough attention to notice. If this story opened your eyes, share it with someone who needs to see it. And tell me in the comments, do you think the family missed the signs or ignored them? I want to know what you think. This conversation matters.
If this story moved you, share it. You never know who is watching this right now and needed to hear that they are not alone. You never know who has been carrying something in silence because they were afraid no one would believe them. Share this so that they know that speaking the truth, even when it costs you everything, is always worth it. And if you have ever been betrayed by someone you loved, by anyone, in any way, just know that what happened to you is not a reflection of your words. It is a reflection of their choices. And your story does not end where they try to end it. Subscribe for more real stories that need to be told. This community exists because these stories matters, because the people inside them matters. We'll see you in the next one.